Morriah, can you just tell me, like, why did If Not Now start, and who are your members, and
Yeah,
what's the political role that you feel that If Not Now plays?
for sure. So we started in the summer of 2014, which was before this past May, the last time that Israel, decided to bomb the shit out of Gaza. And it was an air invasion, it was a ground invasion, and the kind of Jewish community in America writ large was sort of like Israel's right to defend itself, beating the drums of war, super hawkish. And a group of young American Jewish people came together and they were like, this feels really bad. This is really disgusting to watch our community kind of celebrate this and not really recognize the vastly disproportionate loss of life. 2,000 Palestinians killed, many of them non-combatants, and also really recognize how many Israelis were also killed. Like, this is a tragedy. It's not a good thing. And so we started organizing that summer of 2014, to shift the attitudes of American Jews, organize American Jews in support of Free Palestine, against occupation, against apartheid. Obviously a lot has changed since then. We elected Trump. Not me, but us.
A settlement was named after Trump.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite disgusting tidbit of the Netanyahu Trump love affair. It's like, oh, I'm gonna name a settlement after you.
Right. It's like the most horrible nexus of like the sort of like real estate grossness and the like occupation grossness and 100%. The Trump Netanyahu love affair. Yeah. So yeah, obviously the occupation, apartheid, has marched onward since then. But we are organizing lots of young Jews in particular. Over the last few years, we have upwards of 10,000 people come to protests, workshops, events, trainings. We have a small staff, but hundreds of highly committed volunteer leaders. And we are doing what we can to really to shift things.
Yeah. I love part of your mission statement, which basically says, I'll read it, AIPAC, which is, the biggest arm of the Israeli lobby, the biggest group in the Israeli lobby, the sort of broad Israeli lobby. AIPAC has weaponized Jewish identity and false accusations of anti-Semitism to ensure that politicians across the board vote to give Israel a blank check, even as it continues to deny freedom and dignity to the Palestinian people. I think that weaponizing Jewish identity is really, you cuts deep. Like, you named it, put your finger on it. Tell me more about what that means to you, and more broadly, maybe to the members of your organization. And
yeah, for sure. I think personally, I am extremely offended, and I think it's super gross every time AIPAC, calls Ilhan Omar an anti-Semite. They invite Trump and Steve King to the AIPAC conference. Ugh. They love Kufi, Christians United for Israel, led by Pastor John Hagee, who once said that Hitler was sent by God to hasten the return of all the Jews to Israel, right? And they want to make common cause with these people because even despite the fact that they hate Jews, they love Israel. And it's, so they're really weaponizing this kind of story around and the fact that, genocide was relatively recent in our history. And being like, well, we care about Jewish safety. And so therefore that requires oppressing Palestinians, whereas they don't really give a fuck about Jews. Or Jewish
and that
people,
really came into, sorry to interrupt you. That really did crystallize under Trump. I think it's interesting that If Not Now formed before he was elected. Yeah. Right. And then you're like, nah, see, this is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. A lot of, we kind of tried to talk about some of these connections in our trainings before Trump was elected. And a lot of people were like, we really don't want to talk about anti-Semitism. Like, there was a very strong reaction because of the ways that anti-Semitism has been so weaponized by folks on the right to, smear people of color, progressive leaders, anyone who criticizes Israel and occupation. And then Trump started campaigning, and there was a lot of bad shit, but it also made it a lot easier in many ways to show those connections, the love affair between Trump and Netanyahu, and the fact that they're really pulling from the same playbook when it comes to like xenophobia, wall building,
Yes.
authoritarianism. So it
The
does
right here in
really,
this country is so jealous of especially the
they are.
security apparatus, man.
They point to Israel constantly, like that Israel invented the idea of a border wall. They're like, well, if
Right.
Israel can do it, we can do it. Which obviously, let's say nothing of like the racist past of this country. Let's just be like, well, the Jews said it was okay, so it's okay, so
Yeah.
we're going to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I keep on remembering that the day not only do we see a Nazi salute in, once again, another hotel, RB and I were talking about, just all these conference rooms with Nazis in them, on the day Trump was elected. But I remember that I believe Jewish headstones in a graveyard were toppled the same day, like almost as a celebration, and this is supposedly someone who calls out anti-Semitism in others. But anyway, I want to the if not now's tactics, I think are what also are really unique about you guys, which is, there is dialogue, but it's not really about dialogue or understanding or, trips or theater. It is like civil disobedience, pressure campaigns, maybe getting arrested if need be, street actions, and really focusing on Congress. Why and what have you seen a shift even just in the years that you guys have been around?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll talk first about our tactics. I mean, I think, and this is important because I think a lot of people, and this happens with all movements, they're like, we support the cause, we don't support the tactics. Why do you have to be divisive? And I think the thing about dialogue groups and trips are really, really important, and they appeal to people who are already on board. And there's a lot of people who are just like going about their daily lives being like, I don't really need to pick a side on this, or I can pay some lip service, but don't really need to do anything serious, like many members of Congress, Democratic leaders. And so the goal is to actually be like, you can't ignore this. We're at your door. We're coming for you. We're your constituents, and to force a choice, because there are, it's extremely easy, obviously, for people not to. In terms of the change that we've seen in politics, in the past 7 years, on this issue, certainly, but like important to mention the kind of broader context of a rising, progressive movement, some of the most visionary progressive leaders we've seen in a generation, really strong social movements and people power, the Black Lives Matter movement, really reorienting, really, I think, causing everyone to reorient to how we see and understand state power and state violence, right? And
Yes.
so I do think there's shifts happening. The McCollum bill is a good example. Betty McCollum introduced a bill saying that the U.S. should not fund, detaining children, settlement expansion, annexation, home demolition, et cetera. And there are 30 members of Congress who are signed on to it. And that's a big
huge
deal. Yeah, it's a big deal. And last summer, 15 members of Congress for the very first time tried to stop a weapons deal to Israel. The Biden trying to authorize an additional $730 million of weapons in the midst of, the escalation in May, while Israel is literally, bombing Gaza, trying to send more weapons, which obviously he succeeded. But the fact that 15 members of Congress in the first place even, tried to stop it, I mean, has not happened in decades. Like, that's been so far beyond what has kind of been considered politically possible or politically advisable. And so this is all
so
good.
Even if it's just one congressperson, you see that as a win, like gaining ground.
I mean, it's just been so out of the question, over the past several decades, that you could question the actions of the Israeli government, that you could call out, Israel's abuses of Palestinian human rights. And still, it's an extremely toxic political climate. You have Rashida Tlaib, who spoke about the Iron Dome, and voted against additional funding for the Iron Dome. And Ted Deutsch is, in the middle of the House floor calling her a raging anti-Semite. Like, that's the climate that they're in. And so the fact that there are some people starting to speak out on it, like, that's just where our politics are. And that's actually a big deal. And that shows that there are I mean, yeah, it's a big deal to have champions. We didn't have champions, 7 years ago.
We didn't have a Representative Rashida Tlaib
We
in
didn't have a
office.
Palestinian woman in Congress.
Yes.
Like, that's huge.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to ask, because we had Jamal Bowman on the show, Representative Bowman, and I asked him very explicitly about his vote for an additional $1 billion of Iron Dome funding. And he was saying that his constituents essentially were just like blowing him up. They were like calling all the time, writing, etc. And he felt like he couldn't in good faith go against that and still be responsive. And he was like, yes, I understand about Palestinian human rights. What would it take to get someone like Jamal Bowman, one of the newer members of the squad, to vote against additional funding when we already give so much military aid?
For sure. I mean, I think, again, like, this isn't about Jamal Bowman. He is representative of where the political climate is, of what is politically possible right now. And the fact that he is right, but he's listening to his constituents, and honestly, like, they out-organized us. That's what it is. We have to organize our members of Congress. We have to change the political weather more broadly. I don't expect that like, politicians lead without us making them. And I think we've seen that a million times. We've seen Biden, right? Like, we got him in office, but he's still giving us nothing unless we really hold their feet to the fire. And I think it's the same. They're not going to be the solution to our problems. Like, we have to organize them, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, same with AOC voting sort of present or whatever it was on the same vote.
And I mean, the reality is they're in, like, that's the reality in their districts in many ways. Like, our political opposition is much more organized than we are. They're better funded, and that's what we're up against. But I think there's a lot of hopeful signs that we can do that.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.